Um, what role has your faith played in your career success?
I think my faith has been an important part of how I view my role, how I view my responsibility, and to some degree the opportunity that I've had to be increasingly in influential or leadership kinds of roles. Um, I wouldn't say that it has a dramatic impact every day,
Mm-hmm.
because there are a lot of business issues or challenges
Mm-hmm.
that you face, but it has an overall flavor, an overall tone, an overall impact of recognizing the importance of people,
Mm.
the impact and influence that you have on people, and not just valuing people for what they can do, but also valuing people for who they are
Mm-hmm.
and who they are as God's children.
Right. Good. And then, can you identify a career stage or moment when your faith may have been like the driving force for what you do? Did you ever kind of have a sense of maybe calling that God is really calling you to the marketplace, and this is what you're to do and pursue as a career on a personal level?
I think for me, the influence or the recognition of the calling in my role had a different element early in my career than it did more in the middle of my career as
Okay.
I evolved into more leadership or
Yeah.
influential roles. Early on, I felt my calling was more a result of my giftedness, and for me, it was more mathematics and some of the technical and more academic kinds of
Yeah.
things. And I felt like God had gifted me in certain ways, and I didn't fully understand how I should use those,
Mm.
but it was clear to me that I should use those. I should cultivate those, and if God had gifted me in those ways, it was somehow important for me to continue to develop and to utilize those.
Yeah.
As I got into increasing roles of leading people, which might have initially been leading a group of 5 people,
Mhm.
and then maybe a practice of 15 or 20 people, and then a region of 100 people, and then eventually moving to a business leadership role, being CEO on an organization of several thousand people and
Mm.
26,000 people when I
Mhm.
retired. Increasingly, it was obvious to me that God had created a platform for influence and impact that I didn't somehow deserve on my
Mm.
own.
Mhm.
I couldn't have orchestrated it on my own.
Mm.
But the fact that I was in that kind of a role made it pretty clear that I had a responsibility and an opportunity to not only influence the thousands of people that worked at Hewitt and their families, but also the millions and tens of millions of people that worked at the client organizations that we
Mhm.
provided consulting and other services to. Had an influence to help make them, at least in some small ways, have a better work experience, a better life experience
Mm.
in what they spent so many hours of their day doing.
Yeah. So, one of the things that intrigues me, and I think probably would intrigue a lot of our audience too, is a person in your position, right? And just striving for success in both the marketplace and in, your own faith journey, right? How does one responsibly select kind of the investments of your time, maybe even your investments, maybe even your charitable contributions as well? So how was it and how has it been that you've been able to, select? Maybe I don't know if there's criteria that you've used in your mind. Is I'm sure you've gotten tons of requests throughout your career and even now, now that in this stage of your life as well. So how was it that you make those choices, those selections?
Yeah, there are lots of opportunities
Yeah.
to invest your time, to invest your resources, um, and it does take some intentionality and hopefully some discernment to figure out what are the what are the best or what are really good priorities. And for me, I've often focused on wanting to invest financial resources in organizations that also fit with where my passions are and
Mm.
where I'm willing to invest my time.
Mhm.
In a lot of ways, probably time during much of my career has been a more precious resource.
Mhm.
So my typical involvement has been more, financial involvement in organizations that I feel so strongly about. I want to commit my time to, and want to commit my time to organizations that I want to, financially support.
Yeah.
For me, it's been a bit more related to my church, a bit more related to what I think Bill Hybels would call your holy discontent, which for me actually evolves more around leadership and underutilization of capabilities. And while we clearly have involvement in a fairly wide variety of things, most of the concentration is around those that help emerging leaders become stronger, more impactful, not only from a capability point of view, but from a character point of view.
Yeah.
And that whole aspect of leadership development has been something that has really driven a lot of my involvement.
Yeah. Do you use a different measuring stick when you look at the success of your past the company that you worked for, your past organization, versus maybe a charitable organization, a nonprofit, a ministry that you invest time and resources into? Is there a different measuring stick that you use as far as defining or deciding whether or not this is a successful or will be a successful organization?
Well, the principal measuring sticks used in business of financial metrics and profitability just don't apply to in any direct way
Yeah.
to most churches or ministries. I actually wouldn't want to invest in a church or a ministry that accumulates a great reserve of lots of money
Yeah.
and doesn't use that for great kingdom purposes.
Yeah.
So I'd actually like to invest in places that do utilize the overwhelming majority of what they bring in on an ongoing basis. I certainly try to look at impact. It gets a little fuzzier to look at the impact, but I think it's still an important exercise to work hard to not only come up with stories, but to come up with some data, some broader perspectives on the real impact that a not-for-profit organization has. So a combination of stories and some overall statistical
Sure.
metrics that
Yeah.
can help influence both those that are driven more by stories
Yeah.
and those who are driven more by
Yeah.
the financial or
Yeah.
impact kinds of metrics.
Yeah.
I think that's important, even though that's challenging to do.
Yeah.
I think in general, I'd prefer to provide significant support to organizations that have a somewhat broader base of investors or donors, as opposed to having an organization be unduly reliant on one or two or three major investors.
Sure. Absolutely.
That makes it a bit more precarious. And I suspect most ministries would also like to have a broader
Right.
level of support
Yeah.
than one or two or three.
Yeah. And earlier before you mentioned that you measure how you invest your time or resources into what you're passionate about. So what are you passionate about these days? What is God kind of just hearing your heart for? What is it that really gets you excited and pumped up about?
For me, a lot of my passion has been around leadership development and recognizing the impact that younger and emerging leaders can have on their organizations, on their causes, on the people in their organizations. I have been influenced more and know I should be influenced more by some of the levels of injustice and extreme poverty in the world, and have gotten more involved in those, and that's a place where I keep wanting my heart to be softened even more. Although I think that from a skill and an experiential point of view, I can probably pour in more into younger emerging leaders than I can necessarily have as much of an impact on some of these other issues. Although I want to be involved with them and are involved with them, including an orphanage and Western Kenya that we're involved in. in many ways, it's probably good that not all of us have exactly the same holy
Yeah.
discontent,
Yeah.
because otherwise everything would be rushing
Yeah.
in one particular direction.
Yeah.
So even in my involvement in the church, over the last 4 years, I've been executive pastor on a volunteer basis at our church. A lot of it's been about helping the next generation
Mm-hmm.
utilize their skills, develop their skills, have a bigger, kingdom influence.
Yeah. And for these emerging leaders that you want to have an influence on, or being able to have some kind of impact, what's the message that you're giving them, or that you would like to give them?
I think there are actually multiple messages, one of which is to pay a lot of attention to what your passion is.
Yeah.
How has God gifted you in terms of a skill and capabilities perspective, and how has He influenced you in terms of things that you're passionate about?
Mm-hmm.
And while you're creating an impact, to continue to recognize that the capabilities you have and the passions you have come from God, and not to be pulled into the world's perspective of being overly proud of what, quote, you have accomplished, because without God's support and involvement, frankly, most of us can't accomplish very much.
Right. Yeah.
And if we are doing things that are consistent with God's will and work well at it, we'll probably have a significant impact. And if we're trying to do things that aren't in God's will and direction,
Yeah.
we can work really hard and probably not have much of an impact.
Right. And then my last question for you is, if you were to be able to give yourself advice, when you're starting off your career to where you're at now and in the season of your life, what's the advice that you would have liked to give yourself early on in your career?
God has a plan for you. It's a wonderful plan. You should have some intentionality, but don't think you can figure it all out. It all becomes clearer as you look back on it from a perspective of 20 or 30 or 40 years from now.
Yeah. Did you put yourself under a lot of pressure to try to figure it out earlier on in your career?
No, I didn't. I've typically been a goal-oriented person, but my goals have more often been around wanting to do the best I can do, wanting to be the best I can be, in the way that God has wired me and gifted me, and not so much on exactly what does success look like, or what am I trying to achieve in terms of my role or
Yeah.
my income or my influence
Yeah.
or whatever, which actually seems a little strange for me to say that, because I do tend to be a bit of a goal-oriented
Yeah.
person, but it's more of, as
So
I
what
said, of
kept
wanting
you?
to be the best I want to be.
Yeah. What kept you from feeling those pressures? I mean, what was it that that kept you, yeah, from being engulfed by those pressures earlier on in your career?
I think for me, it was in part recognizing my giftedness and interest wasn't so much in having a lofty role. It was, I personally had a great passion for math,
Mm-hmm.
and for applying that in a business setting, applying that in a consulting environment. And I enjoyed doing that. I felt like I was having an impact and an influence. And frankly, if that's what I did for my whole career, I probably would have been very, very happy with
Sure.
doing that. So I more often got pulled into more expansive opportunities in terms of the role and the impact and the influence, than going out and seeking those kinds of opportunities. And some of that might have been influenced by the fact that my wife and I both came from pretty humble backgrounds, have had experiences that are so different and more interesting than we had ever anticipated or even knew existed. So I think I've always been reasonably content while still feeling a responsibility and an opportunity to to work hard and try to be all that God wanted me to be.
And, well, thank you for your time. Appreciate the moments you've taken and appreciate you being here with the group as well. I know they've been blessed by having you. So
You're
thank
welcome.
you. Appreciate it.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.